Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat Show. Hello, this is your host today, Bill Banham, and joining me on this episode is David Lay, Assessment Manager over at Queen Mary University of London. David has nearly a decade of experience in medical education and competency-based training. At Queen Mary University, David leads strategic assessment initiatives and collaborates with academic departments to enhance assessment quality. At the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, he pioneered an e-portfolio enhancement system, ensuring alignment with the Progress curriculum. David is enthusiastic about the implementation of AI as a new way of enhancing competency-based training, believing it can significantly improve efficiency, accuracy, and personalization in various educational processes. Committed to fostering strong client relationships and continuously improving service quality, David is known for his exceptional problem-solving skills, adaptability, and deep understanding of user requirements. So one of David's latest projects focuses on how AI can significantly reduce training time in medical education, thereby freeing up more time for healthcare professionals to address service needs within the UK's National Health Service. By personalising learning experiences and automating admin tasks, says David, AI streamlines the training processes, improving those efficiencies. And this integration aims to enhance competency-based training while ensuring that medical professionals can dedicate more time to patient care. That sounds pretty good to me. Also, David is my mate, Mike O'Flynn's friend. They lived together once. Regular listeners of this show will be familiar with all the disrupt events that I'm involved with, and Mike has spoken at a bunch of those. So there's another reason why we love David today. David, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on. And thanks for outing me as a mate of Mike's.
So
usually keep that secret.
He's a fine individual. He really is.
He certainly is.
And you guys were housemates, I think. Is that
we
right?
Were.
Back in the day.
Yeah, we went to university together, Anglia-Ruskin University. Both studied history and ended up in very different careers from history. But we had a great time.
Okay, so you're a history buff, you're a history student, and now you are doing something very, very different. Why don't you give us a bit of a background to your career before we get into the details of today's conversation?
Yeah, I suppose I studied history, took a couple of years out, worked in retail as a tech team member at Tesco's, where I sold TVs and the like, which was great fun, and then ended up doing my master's degree in history. So whilst it's not medical and scientific in any way, it is very competency based. So very much looking at different sources and bringing them together. And I suppose that's a through line into what I've been doing. But I ended up in admin, as a lot of people do, especially around that time. It was about 2012, 2013. And then I took a 3-month job, moved down to London from Cambridge with my girlfriend, who had no job in London. So I was on a 3-month contract, and I started working at the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. And that turned into 8 years. Luckily, I got my contract extended and a number of promotions there, and then went off to work in software for about 4 years, delivering e-portfolios and training software. And now I've come back into academia, into assessment management. So a bit of a strange journey in many respects, but it's been interesting.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HR Chat podcast. If you enjoy the audio content we produce, you'll love our articles on the HR Gazette. Learn more at hrgazette.com. And now, back to the show.
So what are the current issues, David, facing trainees in medical training? And by the way, I'm just going to preface this. I had to ask David to send me over a very long summary of the project, because this is not an area that I'm super familiar with. So why don't you give us the lowdown?
Thanks. Yeah, I will do. So I think the issues facing medical trainees are very similar to the issues facing a lot of people, especially in education. And the main thing is time. With medical education, especially from the postgraduate side, a lot of people will know the NHS is struggling at the moment with service need and time for doctors and nurses and anyone in that kind of medical profession to not only do their jobs, but be trained well. And that encompasses a lot more people than you'd probably think, because you're not only looking at the people on the ground doing the training, but you've got to look at people who are delivering that training as well. And 9 times out of 10, they're consultants as well. So that takes their time away from it. Like anybody who's been in education, so even from, say, secondary school onwards, there is usually a curriculum built. And again, you as a student or a trainee won't often know what that curriculum is. Within medical education, you're kind of expected to. So a few years ago, the General Medical Council, which is known as the GMC, so if I start truncating everything and putting everything into shortened terms, that's just an area of medical education you'll have to get used to, I'm afraid. But within the GMC, they pushed out a new curriculum base, which is a competency-based curriculum, which instead of saying you need to do X number of hours, or you need to have X number of things to equal Y, it's more that you do something on the ground and it links directly to a number of different learning outcomes. So something that we're probably all very, very familiar with is COVID. That is a really good example of something that could be used as you need to see X number of COVID cases to be competent at treating COVID. But as COVID has died down now, that's not a competency you might be able to achieve easily, depending on where you are in the world, or where you are in the country, rather. So you build it as a competency. So you build it more generically, and you say something along the lines of, has a competency in a pandemic event. You probably go broader than that, and then you build your experiences on the ground around that. Obviously, that's quite an intricate thing to do if you're reading several pieces of documentation. So the method of training generally falls back on the old tired method of X number of hours equals that you're competent. And that really negates the differences and brilliant differences between different trainees and the way different people learn, and really how different people from different backgrounds interact with medical education as well. So I think they're the main areas, but the big problem at the moment is everything that you see on the news is absolutely true. There is a lack of time and a real problem in terms of service need, and unfortunately that eats into training time quite a lot.
Once in a while, an event series is born that shakes things up. It makes you think differently, and it leaves you inspired. That event is Disrupt HR. The format is 14 speakers, 5 minutes each, and slides rotate every 15 seconds. If you're an HR professional, a CEO, a technologist, or a community leader and you've got something to say about talent, culture, or technology, Disrupt is the place. It's coming soon to a city near you. Learn more at disrupthr.co.
The NHS is different to the corporate world then, in that folks have traditionally had to have had X number of hours in the job to prove themselves. And by augmenting some of their roles with AI, we're saying that no longer needs to be the case. How do we then measure the experience, the skills, the knowledge of medical practitioners if it's not with the traditional X number of hours to become a fully qualified doctor, for example?
Well, I wouldn't remove that completely, but I think we, especially within this world of AI, what this gives us an opportunity to do is just be a bit more flexible in the way that we run these programs. So we don't have to rely on the X number of hours if we can give some more accurate data as well. So, I've mentioned the NHS a few times, but specifically within that area, you will find that people think of training as an extra thing to do, and especially if you're doing things online. So in my role when I was working for the software company, one of the things that we we struggled with was to get people to understand the concept of going from a paper-based system to an online system, or a digital system, even more basic than online. And whilst you can change processes over, there'll be some processes that need to fundamentally change because of the way you're using them. And I think that's where we're getting to with AI now as well. So imagine that you as a trainee or a user of a system was doing something on the ground that you wanted your assessor to view. Now, your assessor might just be a doctor that you've seen in the day, might be a nurse, somebody who's not really in your field, but they can judge you on how well you've done that case. So you can write your case up, press a button, that will align to where you are within the curriculum. You can make that focused, you can make it quite broad, and then you will get an assessor to view that, so how well you've done. With a grading scale, a Likert grading scale is really useful for this, so like 1 to 6, and then that's submitted, and that grade is averaged against those areas of the curriculum. So if you've had one area against one specific, let's call it 1A of the curriculum, and you got a 3, that becomes a 3. If you've had a 6 and a 4, it's averaged out against 2, so it becomes 3 again. So you average out against it. Now, what I've described this as to other people is quantifying competencies, because you're simplifying down the process of learning so that you are just logging what you've done, being very easy to be assessed on. And more importantly than that, you as a trainee don't need to read through reams and reams and reams of documents. The AI will do it for you. And that is like passing every assessment you do via the person who wrote that curriculum and knew its intended use. So as you can imagine, medical education changes quite frequently. There's been a few changes in the curriculum since I've been around even, but since 2018, it's all been on the fundamental model they're pushing at the moment. And it is very flexible if it can be used correctly. So if you can pass that through an AI model that allows that flexibility, that will allow you to, one, standardize the process for everybody involved. So you're not relying on individual trainees, you're standardizing it using the AI. And it gives the person reviewing that trainee a little bit more data and feedback to go on as well, because I think that's a really key area. People rely very heavily on feedback, and previously it's been very much, how many of these have you done? How many hours have you done? Do you feel like you're ready? And the feedback element is something that trainees have always come back and said, we're lacking a decent, focused feedback element.
This episode of the HR Chat podcast is supported by Nebula Academy, a technology industry-focused workforce accelerator that offers learning programs to prepare individuals for successful careers. Our approach is centered around cognitive neuroscience research, combining the latest research and modern learning methods to create informative and psychologically safe learning experiences. Our programs enable individuals to achieve career readiness and immediate impact in their chosen field. Moreover, we help businesses create positive learning experiences, increase productivity, enhance team performance, and build upskilling resources to meet the needs of today's modern workplace. Learn more at nebulaacademy.com. Thanks, and now back to the HR Chat Show.
Let's talk a bit more about this idea of competencies, but also I want to introduce the importance of personality types. Your project is all about personalizing learning experiences, and then automating admin tasks with the use of AI. Okay, so we can get more granular with the competencies and then augment and assist and hopefully find efficiencies, etc., etc., etc. But where do learning styles fit into that? Where do personality types fit into that? It's not a one size fit all. I'm guessing there has to be a degree of, this person is a visual learner or this person is an oral learner. Give us your take on that.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I think that does hinder people at the moment. Certainly in the role I'm in at the moment, I'm seeing a lot more requests for different types of examinations and learning to be given to medical students, which is great that we can accommodate that kind of thing. In terms of using something like this for that, I've seen a number of ways you could implement testing of very specific procedures. So you can test procedures using cameras, and they can track all your movements, and the AI can give feedback. But there's no reason on a simpler level you can't visually learn something, feed the data into the AI portfolio that we're talking about via not necessarily typing it up, but actually just speaking about it. You could record a two-way conversation. You could visualize what you're doing in a graphic, or even in numerous other ways. I think the key thing here is standardizing what it is that somebody should be learning via the competencies, and then being flexible around those different areas of or different ways of learning. So you're not changing the goalposts depending on the different style of people learning. You're giving everyone an underlying understanding. The AI is doing the heavy lifting in terms of those admin processes, but that different type of learning can really be taken advantage of, because the AI can understand it if the AI is programmed correctly.
I get that it's more black and white in the context that we're speaking about today, within the sphere of medical services. You know, it's not, we're not talking about a creative industry here, for example. So there are more right and wrong answers, I guess. But where do people fit in? What I mean by that is, how do we ensure that people are involved at the right stages to make sure that they're auditing the AI, because you can't afford to get it wrong, can you? Not when you're talking about people's lives and people's health.
No, absolutely not. I think you raise a really good point there. So I would say the creativity of medical trainees and students is certainly there. It's not a creative industry in the sense that you're creating marketing materials or anything like that in a professional sphere, but you have to be very creatively minded to solve these issues and come up with treatments. And I think you can really push that agenda using something like this. But I want to be really clear on this. The AI tool at the moment that the process I've been looking at is augmenting the process that is already there. It wouldn't be replacing anything. I mean, the tiered system they have at the moment, I think, is really, really, really works well, which is they have something called educational supervisors, which is similar to many industries. If you can imagine your boss in your work having a conversation with you and tracking how well you've done over the past 6 months using a company's framework or core values, this is a very similar thing. So what you're doing is really allowing that supervisor to view the information that you've gathered more effectively, and it's standardized. So you're not relying heavily on if you've got a good supervisor, if you've got a bad supervisor. You're not relying heavily on if you've misplaced where you think this case fits within a competency-based curricula. All the AI elements are there as suggestive elements, and then it gives the people who are using it more time to sit down and discover that feedback approach, which the GMC are really pushing. Because as you can imagine, as a medical trainee, one of the things you do lack is good quality time with somebody who can address not only the educational elements of the competency-based curricula that we've been talking about, but free up some time for those professionalism talks and those engagement talks and all that bedside manner stuff that kind of gets forgotten a lot of the time in, you need X number of hours to do this, because ultimately being a doctor is a very people-facing profession, especially in emergency medicine, general practice, pediatrics, just to name three off the top of my head. But, you're going to be interacting with members of the public. So you want to preserve that ability and open and honest feedback element, but standardize the approach for training across the board, and hopefully get to a point where you can reduce the hours of training so that people can be more efficient in training and you've got more time in service.
David, we are already coming towards the end of this particular interview. Just a couple more questions for you before we do wrap up. One thing that you wanted to make sure that we mentioned in today's conversation is what makes this different. how is this different to others who are using AI? I feel like we have got a pretty good handle on it, but I'm going to challenge you in 60 seconds or less. David, why is this so special? What makes it different? Go.
Well, I actually think it's actually something that is similar to how AI has been used in the past. So I think the big jump in AI, as we all know, is the large language models and ChatGPT. Now, a lot of people are looking at that for creative elements. So, write me a question, write me this cover letter, write me this, and it will come up with things. This is more like AI being used in the more classic sense of AI, so early 90s pushing forward, and how it's still being used today, which is data analysis. The difference with this is the data analysis being used is inputs as language. So it contextualizes what you've put against a framework that's already there. So you're not asking it to reinvent the wheel or come up with something. You're saying, I have done this. Where does this fit within a framework I have given? And if you can imagine that would be done with ones and zeros in the past with kind of data analysis, this is doing a very similar thing, but with prose and with full paragraphs of data, and then analyzing it against, say, a 50, 60-page document and giving you some real insights into what you're supposed to be doing and how your work fits into that.
Very good. And just finally for today, David, how can folks connect with you and also learn more about all the cool things you're getting up to over at Queen Mary?
So the best way to get me is probably on LinkedIn, David Lay, Lay.
Dave, that just leaves me to say thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you very much for having me.
And listeners, as always, until next time, happy working.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.
This episode of the HR Chat podcast is supported by Deal. Are you looking for an all-in-one solution to manage your global workforce? With Deal, you can easily onboard global employees, streamline payroll processes, and ensure local compliance, all in one flexible, scalable platform. Join thousands of companies who trust Deal with their global HR needs. Visit Deal.com today, that's DEEL.com, to see how you can start managing your global team with unmatched speed, flexibility, and compliance. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy this HR Chat episode.